The engines roared to life, echoing through the narrow cabin, as Flight 3-7 prepared for takeoff. Among the passengers sat Maya, a young aviation student with dreams too big for the limits others had set for her. She'd spent years studying the science of flight, memorizing every cockpit control from books and but no amount of training could earn her a place in the real cockpit, at least not today. The airline's strict rules kept passengers out of the flight deck, and the pilots rarely even made eye contact once the door was shut. Still, Maya couldn't help glancing toward the front, her heart racing with excitement as the runway lights blurred past the window. Everything seemed routine until the moment the aircraft lifted off the ground. A strange silence replaced the usual radio chatter from the cockpit. Then came the sound that froze everyone, the flight attendant's voice trembling over the intercom, calling for medical help. "Is there a doctor on board?" The captain's unresponsive gasps filled the cabin as panic rippled through the passengers. The co-pilot's voice crackled through the speakers, strained and uneven. Something was terribly wrong. Maya's instincts kicked in. Her mind raced through everything she'd ever learned, every emergency checklist she'd studied late into the night. But she wasn't supposed to be there. She wasn't allowed anywhere near the controls. Yet as the plane climbed higher and the situation worsened, one question burned in her mind: what if she was the only one who could help? Maya's hands trembled slightly as she looked around. The passengers were whispering, their faces pale with fear. A flight attendant rushed past, trying to stay calm, but her eyes told a different story. "Please remain seated," she said shakily, disappearing behind the locked cockpit door. Maya could see the anxiety spreading like wildfire, parents clutching their kids, a man gripping his armrest so tightly his knuckles turned white. The plane was still climbing, but the usual steady hum felt off. Uneven somehow? She took a deep breath, forcing herself to think clearly. Every lesson from flight school echoed in her mind: communication, control, procedure. She knew enough to recognize that if both pilots weren't responding, the plane was in serious danger. But she was just a passenger, a student who had never been trusted behind real controls. The irony stung. All those years of studying, practicing in simulators, and now she might be sitting on a flight that needed her knowledge the most, and she couldn't do anything. Then she noticed the co-pilot's muffled voice over the speaker again, panicked and uncertain. "Mayday, I need assistance." The intercom cut out before he could finish. The aircraft jolted slightly, a small dip that made everyone gasp. Maya's heart pounded faster. She looked toward the cockpit door once more, her instincts battling the rules drilled into her since day one. Something inside her whispered that this was no longer about permission, it was about survival. And she was running out of time to decide. The seatbelt light flickered above, but hardly anyone noticed. The air inside the cabin felt heavier now, thick with unease. Maya could hear the flight attendants arguing softly near the galley. One wanted to break protocol and open the cockpit door, while the other insisted they wait for instructions from ground control. But the radio seemed silent, and the plane's slow drift off course wasn't helping. Through the window, Maya could see clouds thickening, swallowing the fading sunlight. She pressed her palm against the armrest, steadying herself. Every instinct told her the co-pilot was struggling alone. She'd read about similar incidents, fainting mid-flight, communication systems failing, but never imagined she'd witness one. A few rows ahead, a man in a business suit tried to calm his elderly mother, murmuring prayers under his breath. Nearby, a child started to cry softly, clutching a teddy bear. The sound cut through the tense silence, pulling at Maya's chest. Her mind drifted to her father, also a pilot, who had once told her, "There's a moment in every flight where courage matters more than permission." She hadn't understood it then, but now those words echoed louder than the engines. A flight attendant hurried back toward the cockpit, turning to Maya briefly. "You said you study aviation, right?" she asked, her voice trembling. Maya nodded slowly, unsure what that meant. The attendant hesitated, biting her lip. "We might need your help." Before Maya could reply, the plane shuddered violently, lights flickering, gasps erupted again, and this time, even the attendants looked terrified. The plane jolted again, sharper this time, and a few passengers screamed. Luggage rattled in the overhead bins, and the cabin lights dimmed for a moment before flickering back on. Maya's pulse hammered in her ears. The flight attendants were trying their best to stay calm, but their pale faces gave away the truth. Something was very wrong up front. The intercom crackled. The co-pilot's strained voice came through, barely steady. "We're experiencing a technical issue. Remain seated," and the message cut off mid-sentence. A second later, the aircraft tilted slightly to the right, and the horizon outside the window began to shift. Maya stood up, heart pounding. "You have to let me in," she said firmly to the nearest attendant. "If the co-pilot can't manage, we're running out of time." The attendant hesitated, torn between fear and protocol. Then another jolt threw them both against the seats. People shouted. Someone started praying aloud. The engines roared unevenly, like they were fighting against themselves. The attendant's eyes met Maya's again, and this time, she didn't look away. She reached for the cockpit key, her hand trembling. "If you can help," she whispered, "do it now." Maya's breath caught as the heavy door creaked open. Inside, chaos awaited, the co-pilot drenched in sweat. Struggling with the controls, the captain slumped motionless beside him. Warning, alarms blared, red lights flashing across the panels. The nose of the aircraft dipped slightly, and Maya realized this was the moment everything would change. One wrong move, and it could all be over. Maya rushed into the cockpit, her heart racing as alarms screamed around her. The co-pilot's hands shook as he tried to steady the plane, but his breathing was shallow and uneven. "The controls aren't responding properly," he said hoarsely, glancing at Maya with a mix of shock and desperation. She froze for a split second, staring at the captain slumped beside him, then forced herself into action. Her training kicked in, her mind rapidly scanning every instrument, every flashing warning. She noticed something strange. The autopilot wasn't just malfunctioning, it had disengaged completely. The navigation system showed they were off course by several miles and heading toward a storm cell forming ahead. "We need to correct the pitch before we lose altitude," she said, taking a quick seat beside the co-pilot. He nodded weakly, clearly fading. Maya reached for the yoke, feeling the heavy resistance beneath her hands. But just as she started to stabilize the aircraft, another red warning lit up: fuel imbalance. One of the tanks was draining faster than it should. She frowned. That didn't happen on its own. Her eyes darted to the controls again. Something wasn't adding up. Then came the second blow. The co-pilot slumped forward, his headset slipping off. Maya caught him by the shoulder, her breath catching in disbelief. Both pilots were down. Alone now, she stared at the controls. The storm looming closer ahead, passengers screaming behind the locked door. Her dream of flying had suddenly turned into the ultimate test of survival. Maya gripped the yoke with both hands, her heart hammering as the plane trembled in turbulence. Rain streaked across the windshield, and lightning flashed ahead, lighting up the cockpit in bursts of white. The aircraft had dipped dangerously low, alarms screaming in her ears. She took a deep breath, remembering her training. "Stabilize pitch, control thrust, trust your instruments," she whispered to herself, blocking out the chaos. Her hands moved fast, adjusting the trim, balancing the engines, and correcting the uneven fuel flow. Slowly, the aircraft began to respond. Leveling out bit by bit. Behind the cockpit door, she could hear passengers crying and praying, their fear echoing through every vibration of the plane. The storm loomed larger, its dark clouds twisting like waves. Maya reached for the radio, calling for help. "This is Flight 327. Pilot and co-pilot are unconscious. I'm an aviation student trying to stabilize the aircraft. Requesting immediate guidance." The radio crackled. Then a calm voice replied, "Copy that. Flight 327, we're with you. Maintain altitude, we'll guide you through." Relief flickered for a second, but then another alarm blared. The storm had thrown off the navigation system completely. She was flying blind. Just as panic threatened to take over, she spotted faint runway lights breaking through the clouds below. It was a nearby emergency airfield. Following instinct, she aligned the aircraft, focusing on every movement, every breath. As the landing gear lowered, something unexpected happened. The captain stirred, weak but conscious, whispering hoarsely, "You've got it. Take us home." And with that, Maya made her final descent into history. The wheels hit the runway with a jolt. Bouncing once before the aircraft steadied and rolled down the strip, Maya's breath caught as the engines roared to a stop, the rain drumming softly against the fuselage. For a long moment, the cabin was silent. No one dared to move or speak. Then came the sound of clapping, growing louder and louder until the entire plane erupted in relief and disbelief. Tears streamed down faces that had once been frozen in fear. Maya sat frozen, her hands still on the controls, trying to believe what had just happened. The paramedics rushed aboard moments later, attending to the pilots. The captain gave Maya a faint smile as he was lifted onto a stretcher. "You saved us," he said weakly, and those words sank deep into her heart. For years, she had fought to be taken seriously as a woman in aviation, always told to wait her turn. But on this flight, fate hadn't waited. When the passengers disembarked, many stopped to thank her personally. One little girl even handed her a paper airplane, whispering, "I want to fly like you someday." Maya smiled through tears, realizing this moment was bigger than survival. It was proof of courage, instinct, and heart. Later, standing alone on the quiet tarmac, the flashing runway lights fading behind her, she looked up at the sky she had once only dreamed of touching. Tonight, she hadn't just flown, she had earned her wings the hardest way possible.